One of the biggest mistakes that I see parents make is this hyperfixation on having a baby clean. They wipe their face, they wipe their hands, they're having to constantly clean the table. And what if I told you that cleaning your baby less could actually help your child learn more about food and even help him become a curious eater later on? Well, today we're going to talk about why messy feeding matters. And yes, that is the reason why this podcast exists in the first place. Welcome to the Messy Bite Podcast. Welcome back to the Messy Bite Podcast. I'm your host, Marina Chaparro, pediatric registered dietitian, mom of two. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics and also one of the reasons why this podcast exists, messiness, and why mess is such an important learning thing for especially infants as they're learning to eat. So no, it wasn't named just by coincidence. There's actually a reason why this podcast is called Messy Bites. Feeding kids, really, when we're talking about feeding kids, it's not going to be clean. Let's face it, it's never going to be clean. It's never going to be quiet. It's never going to be Pinterest perfect. Thus, I wanted for this place to be a real depiction of what feeding kids can be. And feeding for a lot of kids, it is chaotic. It is joyful. It is sensory. It is messy. But I think there's also beauty in that mess. And so in today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the surprising science, especially if you're a parent and you're a type A parent that just feels the need to constantly clean your baby or clean their hands or wipe their mouth. I want you to stop. And I want you to listen to this episode and learn why mess is such an important learning behavior for kids. So first, let's talk about the surprising science you might not know. The main thing that a baby does is just put everything in their mouth. They put keys in their mouth. They put, anything that they find on the floor, they're going to put it in their mouth. If you've never really thought about why, well, let me share why. So a baby's mouth is one of the most sensory places. And the reason being is because they have the most nerve endings. And so that is why kids are constantly putting everything in their mouth, because this is the way that they're exploring the world. Messy play is actually a gateway for sensory exploration. So the last thing that I want you to do is limit this exploration. That is why I don't want you automatically cleaning and wiping, because this is going to be their way of recognizing it. And so oftentimes we just think of a baby's eating experience as of just, let me put it in my mouth and just that's it. But there's a lot of steps that happen before a baby's able to accept a food. There's like 3 or 4 different steps involved in the entire eating and feeding experience. So they might see it, they might touch it, they might smell it, they might put it in their mouth, not necessarily swallow it, but there's various complex steps that happen in this entire eating process that I don't want you to take for granted. And on the opposite, I'm going to show you why it's important. And we're even going to talk about some other activities, sensory activities that can help a child, especially if you have a child that is very sensitive to textures. So what we know from the research is that messy play at the table is an integral part of the feeding experience, because again, this is a sensory integration. They're learning through different textures, temperature, consistencies. That is why we really want to encourage, if you've watched or listened to this podcast, I'm always encouraging different textures, because we're changing the dynamics and we're even helping them develop a stronger oral motor development. We know, again, if they're grasping things, if they're touching things, scooping, bringing food in their mouth, this is again strengthening their oral motor skills. So yes, if you want to do purees, you can absolutely go ahead and do that. But I also want to have even mess in their high chair because this is going to be their own way of exploring it. Or if you want to do baby-led weaning, that's kind of the entire concept of them grabbing the food, coordinating, again, strengthening that motor oral skill development. We also know that messiness helps desensitization. So what's interesting is that when I see kids that are very picky eaters or are going through just the natural, normal picky eatingness, maybe around 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, they usually are very sensitive to textures. So if you have a picky eater, it's not just about them not accepting broccoli. They might not be able to accept the broccoli because they're like, ew, the textures. So texture really plays an important role on how kids are receiving that information or whether they accept that texture. Therefore, I want your kid to be, have a different variety of textures early on so they can get desensitized to all these different textures early on. And lastly, when we have messy eating, messy play, it helps with exploration and curiosity. So touch comes before taste and before acceptance. I always say this to my parents. Kids need to explore the food first before they can begin to accept it. So oftentimes as kids are older, let's say in the toddler years, the first thing that we do is we present a food and we're like, here, eat it. And actually, I want you to take 3 steps back. It really starts with them exploring it. If your kid cannot touch a broccoli, cannot even smell some seafood or some salmon, how do we expect them to taste it and tolerate it? So again, we have to go back for them to touch it, see it, smell it. These are so important, yet we often think that they're just insignificant. But for a baby, they are not. So repeat after me. The yogurt in their hands or their sauce in their face or just crumbs all over the tray. That is sensory input, guys. That is where the true learning of how to eat and accept food is happening. This is skill building. This is curiosity in action. And again, one of the biggest mistakes I see some parents make, not all, because I think there's been more talk and research about why mess is important. But if you're new to this and you're definitely a mom or a dad that just likes to be very clean or is more on the OCD side, again, no judgment, we might not know that this could be actually detrimental because this is interrupting focus. This is could even increase frustration. It sends the message that we don't want any mess, like we don't want, and it just reinforces them wanting hands to be clean. And we're preventing, again, that desensitization. And I also want to point out that sometimes I think as parents, we might confuse mess with manners, right? I remember a constant saying when I was little is, con la comida no se juega. You don't play with food. And I want you to get this message out of your head. I want your kid to play with food. This does not mean manners. This does not mean bad behavior. I want him to play with the food because, again, this is going to be exploring. So let's put the manners just on the side. What that old thing that maybe you have your abuela or your mom like, con la comida no se juega. Just ignore it for a minute and listen to me. I want this to be curiosity. I want this to be playful. I want that interaction to happen because what happens if we do? This can help them accept those foods later on, thus prevent potentially picky eating. And what's interesting to me also is this is such a cultural thing because if you really take a step back, for many cultures, I mean, eating with hands and, eating on the floor could be very cultural. So I think this is one of those maybe paradigms that we have depending on the culture that you were born with. But for many cultures, we want hands-on. That is part of the way they grew up. And so messy foods might even mean just shared experiences. So just again, more reasons why I just want you to embrace the mess, and also embrace the mess because later on as kids become toddlers, oh my God, we got to be ready. So I'm preparing you guys. I am preparing you. If you have maybe an older child, maybe a toddler, or even older than that you're noticing your child has a very hard time with textures, there are some activities that you can do. And so these are called maybe even food play or sensory activities that we can do that involve food. And the whole goal is for them to start practicing, playing, exploring different textures. So when they put them in their mouth, they don't have such a visceral reaction. And again, we're trying to desensitize it. Maybe some activities that you might do with an occupational therapist. I love my occupational therapist, my feeding therapist, because they have wonderful skills and techniques that could help, especially kids that are more on the texture side, on the sensory side. Again, that they're gonna be the best to be able to give you more guidance on what we need to do, what activities we need to do to help kids just accept a wide variety of foods and textures. So what to do to build some sensory acceptance? The first thing that you can do is one of my favorites, is food art or food play. And so basically what you do is you grab tons of different food. I've done it in schools, and this is a way to explore food in a non-threatening way. So we might get asparagus, we might cut strawberries in half, and we might use them as stickers or for painting. And so we might get broccoli, and we get a blank piece, ideally like a cardboard or just some type of poster board or just plain sheet of paper that we could do. And we're painting using food as our instruments. So what this does, it kind of forces kids, or no, I'm not going to say the word forces, but it encourages kids to use food and to see it in a non-threatening way and just make faces, be curious, explore, be creative, and also paint some art. So again, no pressure to eat. We're just touching, stacking, exploring. Another great tool that you can use are sensory bins. So again, if you're noticing that your child has a very sensitive reflex and is just very sensitive to textures, this is what we need to work on. So whether it's a bin of rice or beans or lentils, or we might work with silly putty or just beads, just trying to get a different tactile experience so your child is not as sensitive. Cooking together. Again, this kind of encourages kids to use all of their senses. So it depends on your child's age. If a child is going to be younger, obviously we're going to have a lot more supervision, but things like washing fruits and veggies. If they're maybe separating the broccoli heads or the cauliflower florets, again, using age-appropriate tools. You're going to find them. I have a ton of them on my Amazon page. Pouring oil or mixing ingredients, or even painting with a brush if we're using things like butter or ingredients and kind of massaging it. So again, just a very different experience that does not force kids to eat. Just play, explore, and sense the food in a different way. And lastly, again, the supermarket, right? When every time that I go either with a client or with my kids when they were little, is why don't you grab? So I would ask them to grab the beets, grab the asparagus. It increases those interactions, and our job as parents is to continue providing those positive interactions. So the moment that we do provide it on a plate, they've already seen it, they've already touched it, smelled it, maybe cooked with it. So it doesn't come as a surprise. If you put it on a plate, that should not be the first time they ever get to see it. So again, we want to go back to that exploration first. So bottom line, if you had to have one takeaway is less pressure, more exposure. That is how curious eaters are born. And mess is part of that. It is integral that we allow them to get messy, explore the world in their own way. And now it is time for our Messy Bites real life challenge. And so for this week, I want you to pick a meal or a snack for your baby or your toddler, and I want it to be messy on purpose. I want him to explore the food, to get messy, to get curious. I don't want any rush. I don't want any wipes. I just want observation. Let's see what happens, especially if you have an infant or a younger baby. If you do have a toddler, why don't we try doing one of these activities that whether it's washing, whether it's the food art. I want to see what happens when you just let it go wild. Take a deep breath, practice just not wanting to correct or wipe. I know it's going to be hard for some of you moms, for others like myself, not a big deal, thus messy bites. So yes, the mess we can always clean up, but the confidence that you're building, the curiosity that you're establishing, that will be forever. So yes, let them get messy. And that is all for today. I hope this messy episode gave you a different perspective on why we embrace the mess. Let me know if you have any questions below. Make sure you subscribe, send it to a friend, to a comadre. As always, we will see you next week at Messy Bites. Hasta la próxima.